Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust. First order of business is to approve the minutes of the October 19th meeting, and I would recognize a motion to that effect. It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote. Next is the consent docket. Ask for a motion to approve the consent docket subject to individual consideration or some other related motion. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any items for individual consideration? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote. Approved. Next item is concurrence docket. First item, concurrence with the City of Oklahoma City in approving Amendment Number 3, projects DC 236, DC 237, WCO 609, SCO 752 for drainage improvements. Southwest 51st Street and Land Avenue, Brookline Avenue, and Southwest 15th Street and McKinley Avenue to Twin Creek, west of downtown Air Park. An increase of $4,632.58, accepting the project and placing maintenance bond in effect. There's no Oakwat bonds involved, funds involved.
Move rule.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Passes. We now have reports. First is to receive the Kitchen Lake property report.
Mr. Chairman, at your last meeting, White asked for information about potentially leasing or potentially considering the Kitchen Lake property within our West Elm Reservation as a potential regional or local park. We've prepared a report that, let me back up, that property was scheduled to go to competitive leasing this fall. Typically we expect to start in November with the leasing process. So in this case, at his request, we've held this property for lease while the Parks Department looks at the pros and cons of this potential site for their use. It's about $3,000 a year or less.
Are there any questions with regard to the report?
Move we receive the report.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote. Approved. Now, we're going to receive the status report and presentation on the commercial paper program, revenue bond timing, and the Hefner water treatment plant expansion funding options by Public Financial Management.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Whaley with Public Financial Management. You should have a presentation in front of you of the update of the commercial paper program. Go to page 2. Just to catch everybody up, we have a $125 million commercial paper program, the letter of credit with State Street. The expiration is July 31 of 2013, and Aquit's bond ratings are AA1, AAA, which are very high, and everybody should be very proud of that. A little look back at the muni bond market, long-term rates and short-term rates represented by SIFMA. You'll notice in 08 was when we had the big rate spike associated with our bond market blow-up. But here over the last couple of years, short-term rates have been very low, and you have benefited from that through your commercial paper program. On the next page, you'll see Treasury yields. Notice short-term yields are very low out to 2 years, and then we have a very steep yield curve. So the Fed is keeping rates low on the short end of the curve, and then investors are expecting a pretty good interest earnings premium to invest long-term, thinking that over time rates will move higher. Looking at your commercial paper program and what you have outstanding, you currently have $58 million outstanding, and you're paying 0.3% or 30 basis points. So next to nothing to borrow $58 million. Once again, on the letter of credit was extended for 3 years on July 6, and it expires July 31 of 2013. We did this last time, and I think it's good to go through this again, talk about your program, the authorizations, and kind of give us a compliance update. On July 18 of 2006, the commercial paper order allowed us to borrow up to $300 million in the commercial paper program. Our letter of credit, which is another bogey, so to speak, is we cannot borrow over $125 million at any time. And then we have our state procurement law, which says that you cannot award a project unless it's financed through the commercial paper program or you've allocated commercial paper funds for that project. So on the next page, we do a little compliance check. As far as the order is concerned, we had $300 million. We've done 2 refundings, and we currently have $58 million outstanding, which means we have $168 million left to go. We're in compliance. As far as spending, the letter of credit is $125 million. We have $58 million outstanding. We have $67 million in capacity to borrow. And then under procurement law, we have $125 million, which is our letter of credit, 58 outstanding, and then we have about $40 million in projects that we've let against the commercial paper program but have not borrowed the money. So in actuality, we have $27 million that we can spend at this point. So on page 9, talk a little bit about the Hefner Water Treatment Project, which is a very large project that's coming up in the near future. We expect the project to cost between $35 and $50 million. An award will be in January of 2011. So we need to find available funding for this project, and we were thinking of how can we go about this, what kind of commitment can we provide. Temporarily commit some cash reserves and allocate some commercial paper authority. On page 10, by having a $35 to $50 million project, we put strains on our LOC capacity. Like we were saying, we only have $27 million in capacity left. So with very large projects like this, and there will be other large projects in the future, we needed to come up with ways that we could fund those projects and not slow down Aquit's progress on its CIP. So one of the things that we were thinking about was to increase the letter of credit capacity from $125 million to $150 million. One benefit of this would be it will reduce the number of bond sales because we have extra capacity. Now, it won't change things astronomically. You won't go 4 or 5 years between bond sales. But instead of 12 to 15 months, maybe we're now 18 to 24 months between bond sales. Of course, it expands our ability to do large projects. And another thing, it mitigates negative arbitrage by using the CP program. We've talked about this before, especially when you look at this very steep yield curve environment. Aquit, let's say, borrows money at 4 to 4.5% on a long-term bond sale, but you invested at 0.5% at best. While you're spending off that money from borrowing new money, you're just taking on negative arbitrage. You're not earning as much as the cost of your borrowing. So one thing the CP program allows you to do is borrow money as needed and then do refunding bonds to take that long after you've ramped up your CP program. So we wanted to look at the expense estimate for having another $25 million on our letter of credit. If we don't utilize it, if we just leave it in the unutilized area, but we can also, we let projects against it. So we're letting projects, but we're not borrowing the money. It would cost us about $112,000 annually to increase the size of the program. If we had to borrow money against it, since we have a 2-tiered fee, it would cost about $162,000. And we compare that to what if we needed to go out now and borrow $25 million long term, and I did this estimate at 4%, it would cost about $1.1 million annually. So I really think that there is a benefit to increasing the size of the program. Aquit has grown. The utility has grown in the years that I've been working with it. The CIP has grown. So it just seems like a reasonable idea to increase the program just to keep in step with the growth of the utility system. So to summarize the Hefner project, we would do a $25 million reimbursement resolution, increase the letter of credit upon approval of the trustees, to $150 million to fund that project. If we used any of the cash from the reimbursement resolution, then we would just pay it back in the bond sale that's upcoming. And on the next page, we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming bond sale. We need to take out some of the commercial paper that's outstanding now, as well as other things that are coming along in the next few months. And today we're asking for direction from the trustees about increasing the capacity of the letter of credit. We have pre-approval from State Street to do that if the trustees approve. In December, we will come to trust for requesting action to issue revenue bonds in January of 2011, do our rating meetings, and the LOC capacity should be, that process should be finished by the end of December. That's about a 60-day process. Sell bonds in January and receive proceeds in late January or early February. We were looking at 75, I believe, 75 to $100 million. That's correct? Yes, sir. Typically, we've done $65 million in the past, but I think we're going to have more spending to where we can take out more this time. Next, and you've seen this before, these are the projects that have been allocated to the CP program. So a quick summary, which you've seen before. It's an excellent financing tool just because of the low borrowing rates. And by using the CP program, we don't have to borrow new money up front. We just refund out the CP. So we can use time before we have to issue bonds, which means we don't have a reserve fund. It means we don't have to have coverage, and we also avoid negative arbitrage. On the next page, and this is just information, talked in the past about bond insurance companies. We're now down to one investment-grade bond insurance company, that being FSA Assured. And this past week, S&P downgraded that AAA rating at the top to AA+. So, once again, a great reason to be rated AA1, AAA. You avoid the whole bond insurance universe. And then on the last two pages, just shows the current debt outstanding. This does not include upcoming bonds. And then the last page shows the amortization of your currently outstanding bonds. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Any questions? I would recognize a motion to receive this report.
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
On the resolution to approve the expansion of our commercial paper line of credit.
That would be a later item on the agenda.
Thank you.
Final report today is to receive the customer utility bill receipt and payment update presentation.
Mr. Chairman and trustees, Brett Weingart, Utilities Department. I handed out a update of the presentation with talking points, as this is a fairly in-depth conversation when we try to explain how this all works. I wanted to make sure you had the talking points. Feel free to ask any questions along the way. We'll go through it. And if we need to bring another report back at a later date, we'll do so. We go to page 2. As we had discussed at our earlier meeting, the utility spends approximately $1.8 million a year to send out over 200,000 bills per month year-round and collect the payments associated with those. Page 3. Recent changes that we've made, we added the e-bill functionality where people can now go on to okc.gov and pay using their check numbers. We did that in April 2010. About 31% of the electronic transactions on okc.gov are now processed with the e-check. That's been a very good program, and given the fact it's only been a short time we've had it, and it has cut costs for processing transactions. Another new thing that we started was the credit card and debit card companies have the ability for utilities to qualify for a fixed fee per transaction program. Now, they're not all the same number, and different kinds of cards have different fixed fees, and some cards don't qualify for a fixed fee and remain variable. But the majority of our credit cards now and debit cards can qualify for some sort of a fixed fee, and so we're now using that program. And that helps us cut some costs also. Page 4. When we look at our traditional paper bill going out in the mail compared to electronic bills, it costs about 54 cents per bill. Some bills have multiple pages, and so there's extra cost for larger, thicker bills. But the typical customer gets a one-page bill. 54 cents is the total cost, including postage, of 44 cents. So we have a very low cost to produce the paper bill. We recently, as a part of our SAP Go Live, we introduced the electronic bill option. We now have customers using that. It costs 14 cents to send an email out to customers and have them click on the icon and go back into OKC.gov to look and pay their bill. There is a new functionality that Kubra, the provider of our bill print service, is offering where we can use smartphones and give people their bill on a smartphone. In Europe and other countries, in Brazil and places like that, is a primary way people now are starting to receive their bills and pay their bills. And so that functionality can be available to the trust, and we're looking into the possibility of doing that in the future as another way of enhancing that. And more younger people, I'm sure you're aware, are using that as their primary means of communication, and so we're trying to keep up with our customers. It costs about 74% less per bill if we use electronic compared to paper to send them the bill, to present the bill to them. And so, next slide is page 5.
Excuse me, before you move on to the next slide, let me ask you a question. Would there be any virtue in looking at which of these methods provides the lowest cost to Aqua to collect the bill, and incentivizing the customers to use that particular method?
We have a table in the presentation that shows you some comparison of those, the round-trip costs is what we call it, presenting it and mailing it back. What we have trouble with right now, because there's all these different intermediaries that all these transactions go through, it's not possible for us right now to bifurcate out how someone pays, and they can choose to pay different ways.
I understand that's a good point. However, if we determine that method X is the most economical to the Aqua, would there be any virtue in incentivizing people to use that method as opposed to other methods? For instance, e-bill. I have a lot of accounts where I get it just an email on the bill. Some of those accounts have some kind of incentive to me to use that method. And it's probably a split the difference between what it costs them to mail me a bill and it costs them to provide a bill email-wise. And I'm just curious, if we have a system that we like that is cost-effective for us, it would seem like we should do as much as we possibly can to encourage our customers to use that. And I understand that they want options. That's fine.
Right. We
can over-option this thing as well. We give them too many options and it tends to confuse the issue. It makes it more difficult for us to address and deal with all of it. I think we need to be very careful as we put new options on the table that we don't confuse the customers as well as maybe ourselves sometimes. But if we do have one method that is clearly the best method, then let's try to get people to use it.
When we get to slide 8, well, let's talk about that some more, because there's about a 38-cent difference in that process. So with that in place, with the smartphone enablement, we'll be looking at presenting you some options in 2011 for that smartphone option. On page 5, we look at, there's a wide variety in the way that people can pay. We've done a lot in the city to expand the way for people to pay if they want to pay. And so you can see that there are many different ways that people can pay. they can pay the traditional way they always have by sending their bill in with the return envelope, and it goes to the lockbox. We have a contract with BOK where they process the lockbox transactions, where people send in their check and their paper bill stub. We have all these different kinds of credit card transactions. Customers have for many years, 20-some years, been able to sign up for what's called the ACH transaction, where we automatically debit their account every month, and that's, of course, the far least costly option for us to use that approach. Bank and credit unions have expanded the way, try to get customers to pay their bills through them. And so we have a lot of transactions now where people go to their own bank or credit union and they pay their bill for us with all their other bills at the same time. And that's where you see the bank credit union methodology. And then the bottom, of course, is the new e-check. We have 98% of our bills are $400 or less. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But we have had variable rate credit card transactions up to $15,000, where we lose 2.7%. So we have to keep that in mind when we talk about the credit card, the bad side of credit card. The next slide, I wanted to put this slide on so that you could see the second column where it says percent of transactions, and the next to the last column where it says percent of cost. That's a good way for you to look at the variance between what percentage they are of our transactions and what the percentage are of our costs. And when you see a large variation, you can see that we have a disincentive. We don't want to encourage certain types of transactions because they cost us more per transaction than others do. And so, to answer part of your question, Mr. Ryan, we would want to encourage them to go where we have a positive differential. And with that, I think if you look at the next to last bullet I have at the bottom of that, if all of these payments were processed through the lockbox, we would spend $267,000 compared to what we're spending now at $616,000. If we would have never done any of this, we would have spent half as much as we spend today, and we would still get 98% of the money, like we did before. If all 23,574 credit and debit card transactions were moved to one-time e-check, we'd only spend $42,000 instead of $342,000. So I can see there's a trend here where we would want to encourage e-check or ACH as an answer, along with the electronic bill. The next slide, on slide 7, you can see that the variable rate is 2.2 to 2.77%. There are things that the utilities department can do to qualify as many transactions as possible for the fixed utility credit card and debit card method, so we don't have to pay this variable rate, but some cards won't qualify. So we are, as we are learning more, we are moving to new ways of our business processes to qualify more and more credit and debit card transactions for fixed fee approach. So that is a strategy we're doing now to move that direction. The fixed fee ranges from 45 cents to $1.50. Like I said, different credit cards have different fixed fees. The KUBRA contract that we already are working on a renewal on, they have certain fees or less, and the city has a contract with TransFirst, and we use them for the majority of our transactions. In some cases, they're better. It's more the technology that drives us, what we're trying to do for the customer, on which firm we should use, not which company we should select, because there's a lot of technology issues associated with that. As I said earlier, a third of our customers paying on OKC.gov are using e-check with no promotion. We're planning on promotions in the future. The next slide, on slide 8, this is a slide we recently added for today. I think this slide helps you understand real concisely what the round-trip costs are, the bill presentment and bill payment, the total cost to us. And with that one, you can see that the traditional paper bill, paper check is 67 cents. The paper bill with ACH, which has been around over 20 years, is 62 cents. The paper bill and e-check is 69 cents. The paper bill and a 75-cent credit card, middle-of-the-road credit card, is $1.29. The electronic bill and the credit card fix is 89 cents. The electronic bill and e-check is 29 cents. So if we want to encourage anything and reduce our costs the most, it would be electronic bill and e-check or electronic bill and ACH. One of those combinations, the electronic bill and ACH, would be the least costly, but one of those two methods would be the one to encourage. And so that's where we could see a 33% benefit in that regard.
To that extent, then, are we offering too many options? If these two are the best options we could come up with? And if we reduce some of those options, obviously we'd have some customer dissatisfaction, but would that significantly impact our ability to collect the money?
Well, the struggle you get into is that a lot of our customers now like to use a credit and debit card. If one of the questions that trustees ask us to look into is the convenience fee. And in the upcoming slides, we can talk about that. If we leave the option open to them and charge a convenience fee, we can separate the pay channels in such a way that we can create a 100% electronic track and separate it from the credit card track or debit card track so that you could see that benefit. And then you would have a convenience fee associated with the costlier way and not a convenience fee with the less costly way. But there are some issues that you get caught up in when you move that direction. I can talk about on upcoming slides. But there are very restrictive rules that the credit card companies have in place to try to make it so that you need to charge a convenience fee for e-check if you're going to charge a convenience fee for credit cards. There are ways around that. If you go to like ONG's website, you can look at they have separated that out. You can pay for free on an e-check. You have to get a convenience fee if you use Choice Pay. We can do things like that. But that's the thing is that leaving the options open but making the cost be borne by the one causing the cost differential is kind of what we've seen as the most facilitative way.
Excuse me, Brett, let me just interrupt for a second. Yes, I think the answer to your question is we could narrow them down. We're not sophisticated enough to do that yet. We have been feeling like we were chasing after technology changes rather than leading that process. We'll go back and look at it with this information more from a strategic leadership, which way to go. That may require some additional information from our customers, and we'll look at that as well. At this point, as you can see, there are dozens of options, and customers through their own banking have some options available. In other words, customers have choices with or without us.
Slide number 9, please. So looking at the convenience fee, one thing we have to keep in mind is that in just the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a substantial increase in the number of customers that are choosing to pay electronically. And so we're down now in around 120,000-ish numbers of customers are getting, they're paying the old traditional check way. And many of our about 45% of our bills now are being paid in some form of electronic transaction, either through credit cards or checks through us, through okc.gov or our IVR site, or through their banks or other pay options. So as we see this evolution of transactions moving to electronic, many of them are credit card, and so us controlling our costs would indicate that a credit card, debit card convenience fee would be a good thing for us. down the road.
Since we've put all these options in place, have we seen any significant impact on our number of bills that we have that go delinquent? In other words, if people can pay by credit cards, are we reducing the number of delinquencies we have?
No, sir, but people are choosing to make a lump sum credit card payment in many cases. We do still have pay plans, and that number seems to be pretty consistent. But there was some immediate relief by use of credit cards from folks essentially settling up.
Right. Okay. The option of charging a per-transaction convenience fee to customers using debit credit cards help us put that cost on the customer rather than being borne by the utility, because then it's spread to all customers. It would take approximately 6 to 9 months to go through all the processes necessary to deploy this, because we have to make programming changes to our technology systems that collect these payments so that we can track all of them properly and apply the fees correctly and test everything. But it can be done. The next slide, 10. As I said earlier, there are some hoops we have to go through. There are limits that we have to deal with in order to make that possible for us to charge a convenience fee. We have made inquiries to both TransFirst and to KUBRA about the possibility of engaging in this type of activity, and we're interacting with them about options so that we can bring those back to you for your consideration. Visa prohibits fees on in-person payments, so like we have our walk-in center. Some utilities are now putting a call bank, the phones that they can, if someone comes in and they want to pay with a card like a Visa, they can go to a phone bank and they make their phone payment so that they can get a convenience fee. These are methods that people do so that they don't have to eat these percentage fees. That we could go to that if we needed to do so. MasterCard and Discover have special programs for governmental agencies that we could qualify for that would allow us to do in-person convenience fees to some degree. We looked at area utilities on slide 11. OG&E, and OG&E is currently in a transition of some sort from Choice Pay, I think, to Easy Pay or Easy Bill, and so their numbers are ranging from $245 to $295. But if you look at O&G, either $370 fee for payments over $1,500. That's another problem we have is the credit card companies don't want you to have a limit if you charge a convenience fee. But a limit is how you make it possible for you to break even on a convenience fee, because as the larger transactions, you'll still lose money if you have a number. When you look at bullet number 4 on your handout, for Oklahoma City utilities, bill credit card payments processed in July, August, September, 98.4% of all payments were less than $400. 83.85% of the money was from $400 or less transactions. So if we were to have a limit and figure out a way to do that, the $400 limit that OG&E has would work for us also. With that, our recommendation is that if you want us to pursue a convenience fee and bifurcating these pay channels so that we could qualify for one, we would work with information technology and finance departments and our providers of these services and come back to you with some options on how to implement that.
Any questions? I guess, first of all, we're supposed to vote to receive the presentation. It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote. Now we, I guess, need to give input to Brett on where to go from the standpoint of his efforts on this further research. Does anybody have a recommendation, or would you like to repeat the recommendation that you would like for us to vote on?
Yes, that we wouldn't vote on it, just give me direction.
Okay.
And then we would come back with you at a later date. But generally speaking, what we would recommend is that if you want us to further consider the convenience fee, that you would ask us to go back and come back to you with some options on how to implement a convenience fee and try to preserve a free e-check in that process, if at all possible.
Is that okay with you? Yes. Okay with you? Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll continue to look at the strategy for how to guide people to least cost options for us and for them.
Also, I think it'd be important to look at the number of options we're offering, see if we've gone too far, if it's worthwhile to offer those options, if taking those options off would impact our ability to collect the money in a timely fashion.
Yes, sir.
That's a good point. Next item, 6A. We are being asked to approve the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust regular meeting schedule for 2011, and it is in your packet. And I would recognize a motion to that effect.
Move approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Next item, 6B. Approved quality assurance project plan for project SC670, water quality sampling and modeling study of Cimarron River to support a Cimarron River waste load allocation with the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments.
Move approval.
Been moved, seconded. We'll vote. Next item is to adopt a resolution authorizing the general manager or designee to negotiate renewal of the Lake Stanley Draper Marina and concession agreement with JTD Recreations, LLC.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We'll vote. Next item is as to approve a memorandum of lease with Altel Nuco, LLC, doing business as Verizon Wireless, the City of Oklahoma City, and the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust in order to provide record of notice to third parties of the leasehold estate as described in the Fourth Amendment to amendment and restatement of lease and easement for a cell tower near Interstate 40 and Douglas Boulevard, Lake Stanley Draper Reservation.
Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll vote. Approved. Next item is to adopt a resolution declaring the intent of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust in connection with the issuance of bonds by said trust for the payment of or reimbursement of expenditures by the trust for the utility projects in fiscal year 2011.
Move approval.
It's been moved. Is there moved and seconded? We'll vote. Next item. Adopt a resolution directing the financial advisor and bond counsel to work with State Street Global Markets, LLC, in preparing the necessary documents to adjust the commercial paper letter of credit from $125 million to $150 million.
Move approval.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Next item is adopt a resolution approving the terms of engagement for underwriting services with BOSC, Inc. as book running senior managing underwriter. So moved. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We'll vote. Thank you. Is there any new business? Are there any comments from trustees, staff, citizens? Seeing none, thank you. We're adjourned.